Right, we are sitting this morning with the president of the Barkeepers and Operators Association of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Satish Manusar, because we learned from the County Medical Office of Health for Chaguanas that we are getting an uptick, as they say, in COVID-19 cases, and one of those areas that they've identified as being responsible is bars. Now, I can tell you from seeing with my own eyes that bars are definitely, some of them, going against the regulations. I've seen it. So bars are open. That's not against the regulations. But people are actually sitting and drinking at the bars, inside the bars, outside the bars. Good morning to you, Mr. Manusar.
Good morning, Natalie, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
And how did you feel when you heard that from the County Medical Office of Health, that bars, the police, the soldiers, they listed a couple people and entities that are responsible for the uptick in COVID-19 cases, and they've always been saying that's why they've kept the bars, you know, kind of partially closed, so to speak, or partially operating, because they recognize that there is a danger in getting the numbers up?
Well, when I got the information is that we had to look at the whole situation in the area of County Garani, and is something that we would not like to advocate for in terms of bars. From the beginning, we have advocated for the bars to be adhering to the proper COVID-19 guidelines. So this is something concerning, and we are working with the Ministry of Health and the TTPS to try and get this under control.
Yeah, because I live in Central, and I can tell you that I've seen it not at one bar, not at two bars. At one point, I remember, who did I call and ask them, are bars operating as they should? Because people are drinking in the bars. They're not even moving. They're not even trying to move. They are flouting the regulations right there. I don't know about outside of Chaguanas, because I live in Chaguanas, so I have observed it there. But the reality is that they're flouting the regulations. But how does that make you feel, though, as a president of a group of people who are trying to get the bars to reopen fully?
Well, with this present situation, there are the Korean bars across the country. It's not only limited to the Cubao Central area. Yeah. And we, as I said, we advocated from the beginning for people to adhere to the guidelines, but it has been a year now. The bar owners are really frustrated. Remember, we have families to see about, we have workers, and in some situations that is no justification to do what you are doing, but everything needs to be taken into consideration, because it's very difficult for us as we go along.
So you believe that they're flouting the regulations? Well, just because, but is it really I guess it's the bar owners and the patrons who are flouting the regulations, but you think it's driven by the fact that bars are a place where people socialize, and people need that socialization to drink, so they flout the regulations because, well, money has to be made?
In certain situations, yes, but as I say, we're not advocating for something such. We need to do what we need to do to keep the population of Trinidad and Tobago safe in the time of the pandemic of COVID-19. So it's a difficult situation. We're not advocating for that, but there are certain situations that some people really don't have any other choice, but we ask them to try and cease and desist.
All right. When you see the Ministry of Health announce other areas of activities open, such as, you know, contact sports at the community level, you know, when you see some other businesses open and bars can only operate within a limited scope, what does that tell you? Or as the president of the Barkeepers and Operators Association of Trinidad and Tobago, how do you feel about that?
Well, the present situation is very disheartening to bar owners. The sports, I think that's on a different scope. But what we are very disheartened about is that alcohol consumption is being restricted in the bars, restaurants, and casinos. We are basically licensed to do so. And everywhere else in Trinidad and Tobago, you're allowed to do it. And what has happened presently is that the actual industry has been going underground, where we see persons are setting up bars at private properties where alcohol is being sold. So it's basically in the private properties, they are setting up an entire bar setting. Also, you are seeing by shops, mini-marts, parlors, all over the country. Even street vendors are actually having their coolers with the alcohol being sold, and they are not being restricted because the consumption of alcohol and the congregation in public is not restricted. So it's very disheartening to see something that you are being restricted for happening everywhere around you.
I never thought of it like that. So the thing is that, like in the education system where we're seeing underground childcare centers popping up. We are seeing bars being set up in houses too.
Yes, there are bar settings being set up in private properties. You are seeing it across the country. As you had seen over the past couple of weeks, you have seen also massive gatherings in like mall car parks. Even under the flyover in front of Grand Bazaar, you would see large congregations of people liming, playing music out of their vehicles, and consuming alcohol. So bars are basically being restricted for something that is allowed everywhere else, and that is the part that bar owners it's very difficult for us to come to terms. So that why are we being restricted? While it's allowed everywhere else, right. And also when it's allowed in public, it's also allowed in an uncontrolled environment. Whereas in a bar, we could have some measure of control over it.
So what do you say to the scientists and the people who are making the decisions and the public health regulations, the Ministry of Health, the Minister, the CMO? What do you say to them?
Well, when we met with the Ministry of Health in December 4th, we had a discussion around it. And we had a discussion also around equal opportunity in terms of what is happening in a restaurant or a casino. Yet they are allowed to operate at 50% capacity with no alcohol consumption. And we asked for the to be treated the same way. Where from a health standpoint, they say that they didn't have a problem. So it's just a matter of us continuing discussions with the Ministry of Health to have it implemented into the health ordinance, where if that is implemented, we could be able to cope with the financial burden a little better, because we will be able to have persons on our compounds. We will be able to turn on our amusement machines, probably sell a little food or some kind of thing. So you could diversify around the alcohol to earn a living. But at present, we are not allowed to do that. So,
but when you see that people, do you believe that if they're allowed to get that 50% capacity, as you're suggesting, that they won't flout the regulations just the same? If we're talking about an uptick in cases as a result of people patronizing bars, how do we balance the COVID-19 pandemic, keeping the numbers down and allowing that leeway for that 50% capacity? Can they work together?
Well, what we are doing from our association standpoint, we are liaising with the Ministry of Health, the Health Inspectorate, the TTPS, and Customs to find a way of proper enforcement and of the situation. Once as we have that, and we have the lines of communication open where we could have that proper enforcement and hold the bar owners, restaurant owners accountable for what is in their properties, which each bar owner and restaurant owner needs to accept their social responsibility, because we are basically responsible for our compounds and our patrons. We have to accept that responsibility. So once as we could have the enforcement factor worked out and the lines of communication going, I believe that we could have it under control.
So we're not seeing the personal responsibility, so it's going to come down to enforcement.
It's really going to come down to, well, in every walk of life, you'd have people who you would find that will try to find a loophole or break the rules in some way, form or fashion. And the way we deal with that basically in every walk of life is enforcement. So we need to get that part of it up and running properly, which the TTPS is doing a good job at present, because in the past couple of weeks we have seen a different approach from the TTPS in terms of enforcement across the country. So once as we could work together and keep that up, I think we could have it under control.
So as the President, you don't have a problem if these bars who are flouting the public health regulations suffer the consequences of flouting those regulations?
Well, what has been happening at present is that the TTPS has been going around to ensure that you adhere to the COVID-19 guidelines. If you are in violation of the guidelines in any way, they give you advice, they give you a warning. And if persons continue to flout the guidelines, I see no problem in the TTPS stepping in and taking action.
I know that I've spoken to Dr. Patrick, can't remember his last name.
Antoine.
Yes, Dr. Patrick Antoine, and he suggested to me at the time that, we've seen a lot of bars closed as a result of the public health regulations at the time that kept them closed, and a lot of people went under. Can you share with us how many bars, or if you have any idea of the amount of businesses that have closed as a result of the pandemic and the public health measures in place?
Well, what is happening in the bar sector right now is that bars are being closed on a daily basis. Mostly bars that you would see where there's a rental arrangement. But what you have been seeing is that the original operators of the bars pre-COVID, they are now not able to handle the financial burden, and other entrepreneurs now are stepping in and taking over these bars. So it's not that the businesses are being closed, but what happening is that the operators are changing hands, and basically the ones who pre-COVID who invested their entire life savings and everything has been dwindled away. So it's affecting lives and livelihoods across the board on a daily basis.
So what's next? What's next for bar owners? Because the way that things are going, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but in the region, in the rest of the world, we don't have a handle on things, obviously, whether it's with the vaccines, whether it's with, you know, how we manage the numbers. I don't think the world has a handle on COVID as yet. So what's going to be happening with this sector the next 6 months to a year?
Well, the longer this goes on, is the more stressful and destructive it will be to the industry, because, as I said, bars are closing down on a daily basis, and lives and livelihoods are being affected. So we need to liaise with the relevant authorities to find some kind of compromise in where we could do this in a safe and responsible manner. We had a response from the Prime Minister's office where we were asked to meet with the Minister of Trade to present our plan for the reopening of the industry, which we did on the 26th of February. We had 1 or 2 things to work out from both sides, and we are waiting our second meeting to see if we could come to a compromise in terms of that.
What do you say to the people who are watching who would say that, you know, bars and alcohol, that's destructive too? Not just the closure of them or, you know, some business people going under, but the sale of alcohol can prove destructive, whether it's to cause an accident, whether it's to inebriate somebody, you know, whatever the effects may be of consuming alcohol.
Well, the consumption of alcohol is a personal choice, and without the restrictions on bars, alcohol is being consumed. Alcohol is being consumed everywhere else in public. And so on that point, being restricted or not, the alcohol is still being consumed. Also, on the present restrictions, what this has done, like for instance, what Dr. St. Bernard made mention to in the press conference is about 2 persons, I believe she said, that bar hopped, that was doing bar hopping. The present restrictions now basically encourages that, because they are asking you to buy and go. And what persons are doing now, they are buying, going, and then they would go down the road, they would stop at next bar, they would buy a couple again, and so on. So the present restrictions is, in some ways, is creating a bigger problem than what it is trying to solve. So it's something that we need to address, and something that we need to have a discussion around, and we need to look at it from a wider scope if the problem now is being carried out into the public spaces.
Yeah, that sounds like really a recipe for disaster. But I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I'm trying to figure out, what do you think is the middle ground that we can find here? Will that 50% capacity be that middle ground if bars are supposed to be operating at 50%? You know, do you think that will be able to control the numbers, keep people sober, keep the bars operating, allow business operators to take care of their families?
From all the discussions being had with the different relevant authorities, I believe the biggest concern is not too much the congregation in the bar itself, because the bar owners are very basically responsible for adhering to the guidelines in their compounds. What I believe that is the problem is the congregation around the bars, that people normally come and congregate around the bars, on the sidewalks or the roadways and so forth. Now, these people congregate around the bars not necessarily mean that they are attached to the bars in any way, because what we have been seeing is that persons surround the bars more for the lime, more for the atmosphere and the lime and thing, and they walk with their own alcohol and so forth. In certain situations, like for instance in Crown Point, Tobago, our members there stopped selling cups, ice and chaser, because just not to encourage the persons to stay on the roadway and lime. So I believe that this is where the government needs to step in and assist in the situation, if so be it that we need some other form of legislation to be in place to deal with the situation of the congregation and consumption of alcohol in public spaces. We willing to have that conversation and asking the government to not let that hamper the bars from being open. If that needs to be done, that is something that we need to look at.
All right. Mr. Manusar, thank you so much for speaking with us this morning, and all the best. You obviously all are going to need it.
Yes.
All right. We're speaking with the Satish Manusar, President of the Barkeepers and Operators Association of Trinidad and Tobago. And obviously they have to find that middle ground so that operators can continue to operate, but we also can continue to stay safe. We take that break and we'll be back with you.
HD, double M.